Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to go over my presentation on intellectual and developmental disabilities. Intellectual disability is used to be also known as mental retardation. This term was used when there were limits to the person's ability to learn at an expected level and function in daily life. Also, it's considered a disability characterized by significant limitations in both intellectual function and adaptive behavior, which covers many everyday social and practical skills. This disability originates before the age of 18. Also, with intellectual disabilities, you see a lot of also additional diagnoses with this. It's affiliated with like autism, is one of the ones that I'm primarily exposed with. Also, just limited intellectual disability causes issues within proper social activities and interactions with peers. Developmental disabilities is a group of conditions due to impairments of physical, learning, language, and behavioral areas. These conditions begin during the developmental period and impact day-to-day functioning and usually last throughout the person's lifetime. Beginning at any time during the development periods, and it usually lasts throughout the person's lifetime. Developmental disabilities occur along all races, ethnics, and sociological economic groups. Recent estimates in the United States show that about one in 6, or about 15% of children aged 3 through 17 have one or more developmental disabilities. Personally, my son has quite a few developmental disabilities, including he didn't walk till the age of 4. He is unable to speak. He unable to properly communicate through even sign language or any alternative language that's available. These are some of the conditions that we can see grasping over genetic disorders. Some of them are also related to possible trauma to the brain, or an interaction also with maybe fetal alcohol syndrome, or a traumatic event to injure the child can cause some developmental delays and recession besides just a genetic or a chemical change within the brain. Here is the video that I have selected. Let me see if I can pull it up for you guys.
Tell me just a story about the impact that Best Buddies has made on a child with intellectual disabilities.
Sure. I mean, there's thousands of them, of course, and I get them all the time, honestly, and they're small in some ways and big in other ways. I mean, big ones are like, my first buddy in Miami, Florida, when he came, sat at home, watched TV with his mom, and had no job, no sort of social life, no network. And today he's been in the same job through Best Buddies Jobs for 18 years and makes a living, lives independently on his own behind his mom's house in his own apartment, cares for himself, rides public transportation all over the city. Has enough money to go to a Miami Heat game or Miami Dolphins game, went to the Super Bowl in Tampa one year. Has an incredible social network, not only for the people that he's met through me, but those people have introduced him to other people, so he knows a lot of people. He really lives a thriving, integrated, wonderful life, and I think, that's what we all want for our kids. I mean, I want that for my kids, and you want that for your kids, and I think the parents of people with special needs want exactly the same thing that I want. And I think when you see someone seems to have so little and is so sort of isolated and segregated from society, that through Best Buddies Jobs and through relationships with people in Best Buddies, that they really have a full, enriched, engaged life. To me, that's a home run, big success, and I think that's what we really want. And I think, they start in little baby steps in schools. I'll go to a school and be a kid that will be bullied in the school or left out or eat lunch alone, and now they're having lunch together. They're the prom king or the prom queen in the school. A kid was telling me just yesterday that, she was in the hospital a couple months ago, and she got flowers from her E-buddy, and it's the first time she'd ever gotten flowers from anybody in her whole life. And she's, I think, 32 years of age. It's simple expressions of concern, I think, and care that a buddy can give to another person with special needs that makes them feel like, they matter, they count. which is what I think all of us want to feel like, that, you know, what we're doing in our lives matters and it counts, and that, you know, that we're contributing in some meaningful way, and that, you know, we're playing a role in the grand scheme of the world. And I think, you know, a volunteer can do that for a person with special needs, but a special needs person does it, you know, without even knowing it, to their volunteers, making them feel like, wow, when, you know, you send it to a person with special needs, it may be one of the most important things in their whole life.
Right.
Wow.
They don't experience that on a regular basis.
And they don't expect it, you know, and I think, you know, it's great, you know, when you get in a mindset, and I think people with special needs have that very often, you get in a mindset where you don't expect things. You don't expect someone to do X, Y, and Z to you, and then when they do it, you're like, wow, you're overwhelmed by it. I think we get a lot in our society, too, where everybody expects you to write a thank you. You know, expects when you flower. You have a kid, they expect you to send something to them. And I think that people, you know, especially don't do it and don't think that way, and when you do it for them, they're just so overwhelmed and so grateful, and that's really refreshing and wonderful to see. You know, we have so many success stories with our buddies that, you know, have never had enormous fear of giving a speech or speaking out in public, and you know, they go through our ambassadors program, they get trained, and we work on oratory skills and speaking skills, and they go out there and they speak in front of 500 people or 1,000 people or 2,000 people, and they kill it. And they're articulate, and they have a great presence about them, and they're forceful and sensitive, and they tell a great story of their life and what Best Buddies has meant to them in their life and what friendship means to them. I think when you see someone who's so shy and reserved, and then they come out of their sort of shell, and they command an audience of 2,000 people better than Barack Obama, you know, it's exciting. I mean, it's a real success story. Or when in my own personal life, when I have a buddy and he meets my children, and you know, my children become more patient, more compassionate, more grateful for the gifts that they have as a result of having that person around them, seeing that person. You know, like my buddy in Miami, I'll never forget it, when my kid was always in the water polo team, you know, he was the guy that came to the water polo games with me. He cheered louder than anybody else. You know, my kid would be in the huddle with his team, and the coach and my buddy would get in the huddle, and you know, he'd be part of the team, and even the most tense moments, he'd jump in there and he'd just relax the whole team. And he was just such a fan, so much enthusiasm. You know, it's one of the things that my kid remembers the most about, you know, water polo season, not being captain of the team, but, you know, that, you know, George was part of the team, and he was there, and the coach still, when I see the coach, he still says, oh my God, it was so great when George came to all the games. We missed it so much when your son Teddy graduated. So, I think that, you know, there's just so many little stories like that where they have a huge impact and, you know, carry their grace and their presence of God with them, and I think it, you know, enriches everybody's life.
This video really reached out to me a lot for the mere fact that I do have a son with special needs, and I've been able to more recently reflect back on the simple things, even though he's 4.5, almost 5, the impact he has had on so many people's lives. And with his intellectual disability, he is at a range around of a 2-year-old to 2.5, maybe 2.5-year-old, even though he's almost 5. Again, physically and, fine motor skills, he's all delayed. And the impact that he has made positively on so many individuals, of just, he tends to have people gravitate towards him. So people that, are able to intellectually even with the disabilities, to be able to reach out and the impact and the change that they're able to make with people. This video really spoke to me. The article I had selected was by Anton Dawson and Jonathan D. Jeffrey. Pardon me, I'm horrible at pronouncing names. What is normal behavioral in persons with developmental disabilities? This article was very interesting to me because currently in my job, I deal with individuals also with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I have a full range within my adult day program that I work at, and this article really spoke to me in a lot of different ways of the challenges that we face on a daily basis. It's set up as a basic abstract research article. It reviews over where the purpose of the article is annoying and bothersome behaviors among persons with developmental disabilities is a relatively frequent phenomenon. However, not all behaviors that is difficult to accept in the surroundings should be seen as abnormal or problem behaviors. Some of these behaviors may be an expression of the person's psychosocial needs and may be considered the adaptive and normal. This paper aims to discuss these issues. With reviewing it, it really does break down very nicely, how there is no clear definition of what the certain things with a developmental disability are. Or they also cite some other terms along the lines of problem behaviors within the society and out in social environments, and what things are not correct. They also talk about what's called challenging behaviors. Challenging behavior has become an alternative definition for the phenomenon, referring to the culturally abnormal behavior such as an intensity, frequency, or duration of a physical safety of a person or others likely to be placed in serious jeopardy, and or the behaviors which is likely to seriously limit the use of or results in the person being declined access to ordinarily community facilities. So the article really gets into breaking down certain things, normal versus abnormal behavior, antecedents and certain dimensions. It's broken down to an objectification, plamatic dynamic. Sorry, I'm having a horrible time speaking today. A value orientation dimension, a person's creative dimension. It also breaks down into where the problem behavior is seen from a developmental perspective, where it's shown that just how the behaviors can impede on the developmental process. Then also bringing in these normal and abnormal behaviors is taking consider of the practice of, treating them, and how also it's gone ahead and become an issue for the person's just basic developmental delay in the models of the onset of certain things, and how it's the cycle of how the behaviors are causing these developmental delays, but the developmental delays are also going and creating the issues with behaviors. The paper goes into continuing discussing, giving different explanations and definitions and interventions that are used within, and trying to give a little bit more clarifications on how there's such a difference between, and there's such a difficulty between normal, and identifying the difference between normal and abnormal behavior. But that's one of the first steps in relieving some of the aid to individuals with intellectual disabilities. So I definitely recommend this article for just a review. Someone like me, new into the field, it definitely gives you a little bit more of a perspective of the difference between some normalcy behaviors and why some people with developmental disabilities, whether it's physical or it's intellectual, start having certain behaviors manifest and become an issue as they go along. I've cited about 5 different resources here. I found a ton more when I was out there. A lot of them reflected back on being that it was developmental disabilities, childhood type of resources that I found. Disease Center, the Centers for Disease and Control and Prevention had some fact sheets that were very brief but very informative. I got a lot of the definition portions from them. Also, if you look into the Department of Intellectual Disabilities and the departments, it has a lot of information out there on just basic statistics of what percentages of individuals have it, where it is, and trying to giving a little bit more of a clear definition of what an intellectual disability is and where the development is. So I hope this was able to help you guys out with some things and give you a little bit clarity. Oops, and I went past my reference sheet. So have a great night.